The United Nations General Assembly Summit holds next week, and the summit aims at addressing the progress made by each country in their implementation of the Paris Agreement on climate change actions and policies. The Paris Agreement was signed in 2016 within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It deals with greenhouse gas emissions, mitigation, adaptation, and finance. The long-term goal is to keep the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels and to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, that's since this would substantially reduce the risk and effect of climate change. Let's break down the numbers. Joining me now on the news from New York is environmentalist Phillips Jakpor. Thank you very much for joining in at this time. Well, of course, the Nigerian delegation is going to be actively represented, headed by President Muhammadu Buhari. But as one who has monitored the issue in Nigeria, what is Nigeria's report, or what will be the Nigerian situation when the summit begins next week?
Well, thank you. To break this down to the language that the average Nigerian can understand, this meeting is actually called to review the progress of each country and in regards to tackling the climate change, especially cutting emission at source. Unfortunately, I won't say Nigeria has done very much. We are already suffering the impacts of climate change, as we know, desertification in the coastal erosion. We're having flooding. So these incidences are growing and increasing by the day. Now, our determined contributions, the NDCs, there are some things we are supposed to do as a country, which includes, for instance, adopting smart agriculture, transport systems that can take masses so that people can keep their cars in their houses. And all these things actually are the things that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. But I don't think we've done much, irrespective of whatever the government is going to say. It is clear enough for the average Nigerian that we have a mix-up in policies. A government that is talking about cutting down emissions has not done much in terms of stopping the emissions. Gas flaring in the Niger Delta is still going on. And as we know, gas flares are some of the highest contributors to the global warming. We are talking about reviving coal mining, which is a dirty form of energy, which also pollutes, also contributes to climate change. Sadly, too, we are talking about going nuclear, setting up nuclear plants in 2 states in the Federation. All these are not indications of a country that is serious about, tackling the climate crisis.
Right.
But
Philip,
yeah.
Let me just say, comment at this point now with what your last statement. Why Nigeria and indeed the rest of the world has not given climate change discussions the kind of seriousness that it entails, looking at the levels of damage now that climate change has caused in the country and beyond?
Well, I think the development model we have embraced is one that cannot help the climate. We are still heavily drinking fossil fuel. Our talk about transiting to renewables, we've not really done much about it. And then the corporations that are involved in polluting our environment, we are still in that unholy embrace. So Nigeria has not gone beyond talking about transition to actually doing what we should do. We are not yet there in terms of solar energy. We are not there in terms of windmills. So it takes a government that is very, very serious to do this. And then the fossil fuel industry, they are also heavily involved in this process. They are crawling all over the discussions in the Conference of Parties meetings, in Bonn. They are everywhere. And of course, they are pushing what we call 4 solutions. And what are these 4 solutions? They are talking about carbon trading. Carbon trading is about mortgaging the environment. It is not about stopping what is causing the climate crisis, which is rested in cutting emission at at its source. We must start looking at alternatives, and we're not doing that.
All right, Philip Jakpor, well, we wish you all fruitful deliberations in New York when these discussions commence next week. Thank you so much for the contributions beforehand.